Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Forever Free, the story of emancipation and reconstruction, by Eric Foner, with commentary by Joshua Brown, narrated by J.D. Jackson. Publisher's note: in this audio edition, you will hear references to visual media present in the print and ebook formats of the book. The most magnificent drama in the last 1,000 years of human history is the transportation of 10 million human beings out of the dark beauty of their mother continent into the newfound El Dorado of the West. They descended into hell, and in the 3rd century they arose from the dead in the finest effort to achieve democracy for the working millions which this world had ever seen. The unending tragedy of Reconstruction is the utter inability of the American mind to grasp its real significance, its national and worldwide implications. This problem involved the very foundations of American democracy, both political and economic. W.E.B. Du Bois, Black Reconstruction in America, 1935. Forward. The struggle for equality in America, like that of the ancient Israelites, is of biblical proportions. The story of 4 million slaves and their transformation from bondage to citizenship is one of the great and inspiring events in world history. We were compelled by this history because it revealed a little recognized commitment to and embrace of freedom by the nation's African American population before, during, and in the immediate aftermath of slavery's demise. And yet this critical moment in our nation's history has failed to establish itself in the national memory, at least with any accuracy or full depth of understanding. Here was a critical and revolutionary moment of change that was essentially unknown to most Americans, a period that involved not only the destruction of slavery, but also a dozen-year period known as Reconstruction, of profound political, legal, economic, and racial transformation that followed the end of the Civil War. The understanding of the Civil War and of the war's root causes reveals the contested meaning of the era of emancipation and Reconstruction. What had the war accomplished? Who had benefited and who had suffered? What had freed people sought, and what had they and their allies achieved in the aftermath of freedom? David Blight argues in his influential book Race and Reunion, The Civil War in American Memory, that the desire in the half-dozen decades following the Civil War to obscure the real causes of the war, the emancipation of 4 million slaves, led to the denigration of black dignity and the attempted erasure of emancipation from the national narrative of what the war had been about. W.E.B. Du Bois drew similar conclusions 66 years earlier in Black Reconstruction. Little effort has been made to preserve the records of Negro effort and speeches, action, work and wages, homes and families. Nearly all of this has gone down beneath the mass of ridicule and caricature, deliberate omission and misstatement. As a result, one of the great triumphs for equal rights in American history was obliterated, overwhelmed by a fascination with the valor of combat. That undue fascination tended to reduce the war to a noble tragedy pitting brother against brother. Whether in novels, popular histories, feature films, or television series such as The Civil War, the tragedy and glory of armed combat overrode the central fact that, by its end, the war was about the future of the institution of slavery and the people whom it enslaved. Because such attitudes continued to dominate the historical consciousness of most Americans, and because the facts of Reconstruction remain largely unknown, we felt both humbled and challenged by the opportunity to tell this story anew. The great irony about the titanic struggles that took place during emancipation and Reconstruction is the nature of the role that the freed people played. Rather than passive recipients of freedom bestowed upon them by the Union Army and the federal government, millions of African Americans actively sought their own freedom during the war by running away from slavery, by sabotaging Confederate efforts on the plantations, and by fighting valiantly as Union soldiers. The freed people also asserted their new-won freedoms in the war's immediate aftermath. A rich array of documents from the period reveals that African Americans embraced the simple rights of citizenship and its responsibilities. They wanted to vote, sit on juries, marry, worship as they chose, ride public conveyances, and own land. They wanted, in short, the chance to participate in the American dream. The violent suppression of that dream haunts us to this day. The what-ifs of the story are legion. What if the brief flowering of equality in the war's immediate aftermath had been allowed to flourish rather than being brutally suppressed? What if the federal government had upheld the Constitution and guaranteed the rights of all its citizens? The story is at once poignant and urgent. The complex legacy of Reconstruction is lived every day in America. Until Americans understand that history, we are, as the saying goes, condemned to repeat it. The book and the project from which it emerged grows out of a long-standing collaboration among historians, writers, and filmmakers. We began work in the late 1980s on film projects about ordinary people and their impact on American history, intended for a broad popular audience. We set out to produce a pilot episode for a television series that would focus on the years immediately following the revolutionary transformations ushered in by the North's victory in the Civil War. In Savannah, Georgia, where we were filming the pilot, we met Wallace Wesley Law, W.W. Law. Mr. Law, as we came to know him, was the living embodiment of the civil rights history of his beloved city, and the carrier of its civil rights tradition extending all the way back to the first days of emancipation. Mr. Law spoke eloquently about the colloquy, a little-known encounter in January 1865 between two of the highest-ranking figures in the U.S. government, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton and Union Army General William Tecumseh Sherman, and representatives of Savannah's African-American community. Mr. Law communicated a reverence for the colloquy to everyone who had the privilege of meeting him, including those of us working on the Forever Free television project. It is the clarity and sheer scope of the vision that ordinary black Americans recently liberated from slavery revealed in their exchange with Stanton and Sherman that gave us the central idea for the television series and this book. Our colleague and the author of the central narrative in this volume, Eric Foner, has spent 2 decades on the history of this critical era, most expansively in his critically acclaimed book, Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, 1863 to 1877. In this book, Foner synthesizes the recent scholarship on slavery, emancipation, and Reconstruction into an accessible narrative. In doing so, he makes a powerful case that history is as much about the present as it is about the past. To this end, Foner carries the story forward from slavery to our current era, exploring the many ways in which ideas about race and rights have shaped and continue to shape our experience as citizens. Joshua Brown's essays, interspersed with Foner's chapters, illuminate several themes of the Forever Free project. They are called visual essays in this book because Brown analyzes the impact of race on the rapidly expanding visual culture that suffused American society throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. In that sense, Brown's essays literally and figuratively illustrate a central theme about American popular culture. It is, and always has been, a battleground on which cultural attitudes are contested and through which popular attitudes are influenced and shaped. The shape and structure of this book deserve some explanation. The Foner chapters and Brown essays interact in ways perhaps more akin to jazz than to a standard historical narrative supplemented by traditional illustrations. Each stands on its own, but each also enhances the overall argument of the book, playing off the others and considering common themes.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?